Welcome to the Netherlands Business Opportunities Seminar for the sector waste. Over the years, the business opportunities seminars were held through in-person seminars. However, with the current COVID-19 pandemic, ADB had started adapting to virtual events as an alternative. So for today's webinar, the following items will be discussed. The ongoing and upcoming business opportunities, new insights on waste to energy and solid waste management, to finalize with updates on procurement process. I will shortly put on my video so you can all see me shortly. So my name is Jules van San. I work as a private sector liaison officer at the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. We work in a small team of around 7 people that function as a liaison to Dutch companies and multilateral development banks. And I am myself responsible for the account of the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. So any questions companies might have regarding banks, please contact me and see how we can assist you with it. For today, I will be the moderator for this event. So I will put off my video again so we all have the connection, no distractions. All right. I would suggest to start with the webinar officially. Allow me to introduce you the advisor to the executive director for Canada, Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, Norway, and Sweden, Mr. Mark Royaker. He's from the Netherlands, completed his master's degree in business economics and general economics at Tilburg University. After his master's, Mark obtained a postgraduate diploma in financial policy making from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam. He has over 9 years of professional work experience, held various positions at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, most recently as a senior policy advisor at the Department for European Integration. He was responsible for coordinating the Dutch position in EU working parties for development cooperation. He worked at the Dutch embassy in Kinshasa and Kigali and was seconded to the European External Action Service in Brussels as policy advisor on Nigeria and Boko Haram. Please let me introduce Mark Royaker.
Thanks, Jules, for this introduction. Can everybody see me? I think so. So I guess we go to the slides. I will stop my video so everybody can see the slides properly. So indeed, I work for the constituency office currently at ADB that represents the Netherlands, but also some other countries like Canada, the Nordic countries, and Ireland. So our office is part of the board of directors at ADB, and our role is to determine the strategic directions of the bank and determine the policies and decide on ADB's projects. So as ADB seeks to improve its products and its lending and provide more and better value added, we need the world-class products and knowledge that you, the Dutch company, can provide. So this is also the main reason for our event today. So I would like to start by giving you some context about the Dutch involvement of the bank. So the Netherlands is actually a founding member of the ADB. The ADB was founded in 1966. By now, there's a paid-in capital of 76 million and a callable capital of 1.5 billion. So the Dutch have a voting power of around 1.1%. And we're also a large donor in the ADF. The ADF is the Asian Development Fund, and that's the grant window of the Asian Development Bank. Next to that, we are also a large donor in the Water Trust Fund. Actually, we're the largest donor in this setting. So our Minister for Development Cooperation, Kaag, is also the governor, and the Director General is the Deputy Governor of the bank. It's also interesting to note that we have a Dutch Vice President in the bank, Ingrid van Wees, who is responsible for finance and risk management. So next to two secondments from the Netherlands government in the ADB, we also have 21 Dutch staff working in Manila. Next slide, please. So let me continue this intervention by showing you a little bit of the success rates of the Dutch companies in ADB. So this graph is actually divided in 3 columns: goods and works, consulting services, and overall. So if you look at the goods and works, you can see it's more tricky, more difficult if you distinguish by nationality to win contracts at ADB. So by nationality means that the company is registered in the Netherlands, and by origin means that the products originate from the Netherlands, but the origin don't constitute to direct contracts of ADB. So typically, companies from our constituent countries are better placed to react to consultancy tenders to compare to goods and works. Companies from the Netherlands, but also that holds for other European companies, are typically outcompeted by Chinese, for example, or Indian companies or other companies in Asia, as they can provide labor, concrete, and steel, so the construction materials for much lower rates. So as for consultancy, ADB, we want to tap into the high-end knowledge that is available within Western companies, and consultancy assignments might therefore present a better business opportunity in general for Dutch companies with the ADB. So we tend to focus a little bit more on consulting as compared to goods and works. So it's also, what I also should add, that it's not easy in general to win contracts at the ADB. So competition is quite fierce. On average, out of every 10 expressions of interest, only 1 contract will be awarded. So this holds for companies in our constituency. So the success rate is more or less 10%. So in order to increase your success rate, I would recommend you to closely follow the presentations to come. And I'll also give you some other tips in the next slide. So next slide, please. So this is an overview of where ADB is based. Probably most of you know that our headquarters is in Manila, HQ. But apart from that, we have many resident missions based all over Asia and the Pacific. So, for example, if you're interested in doing business with ADB in a project, for example, in Indonesia, it might be very worthwhile to connect to our mission in Jakarta. So I know in COVID times it's not probably easy to fly to Jakarta and see people. So this all has changed a little bit. But of course, our colleagues in Jakarta, and that holds for the resident missions all over Asia and the Pacific, are also, of course, reachable online. Next slide, please. So I don't have, unfortunately, the time to discuss this slide in full. I was only, we only have 5 minutes for its introduction, but I would highlight just a couple of points. So the first thing is that a lot of information is available online. ADB has a great website and is actually doing a great job in putting lots of information online. So, for example, all the projects that are currently ongoing in, say, Bangladesh or in Vietnam, but also the pipeline projects are available online. So I would really encourage you to have a look at the site. And well, you can even Google if you, for example, say ADB projects in Vietnam. You get a long, it's a really good sort of information. Secondly, winning contracts at ADB is not easy, and it will definitely take time. So that's a little bit of expectations management. Another suggestion is that for the newcomers to ADB, a suggestion would be to link up with companies that are already experienced in doing business with ADB. So all the shortlisted companies are also online. You can access that. So it might be worthwhile to explore other companies and colleagues that might get a contract in the near future with ADB, and to link up with them and to make a consortia, so to say. So most importantly, if you're serious about doing business with ADB, don't hesitate to contact RVO, so Jules, or the Dutch Embassy in Manila, or my office or myself, in case you're serious and need some guidance into this process. Finally, our office made a booklet with tips and tricks on doing business with ADB. That's a picture on the right side of the slides, the green booklet, which is readily available if you're interested, or through RVO or through myself. So I would like to close this introduction by extending a big thanks to the team of ADB and to RVO who have made this event possible. And I would like to wish you a very interesting and successful event. And if you have any questions later on, there's plenty of time to do that. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jules.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction. Now let's talk about the Virtual Business Opportunity Seminar goals. I'd like to welcome the Director of Procurement Division, Mr. Rustam Ayuma. He has over 19 years of experience at ADB, joining the bank in 2001 as a portfolio management officer in ADB's Uzbekistan resident mission, and later moved to become a procurement specialist in the PPFE. His experience in ADB includes working on large and complex turnkey civil work and supply contracts in the irrigation, transports, urban and energy sectors, carrying out country, sector and project procurement risk assessments, procurement capacity assessments, and executing agency. He serves as a secretary to ADB's Procurement Committee, responsible oversight of high-value procurement transactions across all ADB developing member countries as the head of procurement support unit, providing data and analysis on transaction. Please welcome Mr. Rustam Ayuma. Rustam?
Yes, I am ready. Will we turn on the video or no need? Anyway, thank you, Jules, and good morning, dear colleagues in the Netherlands, and good afternoon to our ADB colleagues in Manila. I would like to welcome you all to this virtual business opportunities seminar. As Jules mentioned, that we used to have this kind of business opportunities seminars in person. We used to have on average 20 plus seminars all over the world, depending on the demand from host country organizations. But this year, of course, COVID has made a bit of serious impact, and we had to change our plans. So for many of you who are already working with ADB, you perhaps know that every year for the last 10 years, we were organizing so-called business opportunities fairs in Manila. So this was a kind of big forum for all consultants, contractors, manufacturers, suppliers, and NGOs and other organizations who are interested to work with ADB. So they would come to Manila for 2 days. They will learn about ADB's operations, but also will be able to network with themselves. So this year, we were actually planning to go to the region, one of the regions where ADB operates, to come closer actually to the business community. Because say in Manila, last year we had more than 1,000 participants, but half of them were from the Philippines, because obviously there is quite a big community in the Philippines and they were happy to participate. So we wanted to do it in one of our regions, but unfortunately, due to COVID disruptions, we had to change our plans and postpone it to a later date. But then we decided that we will switch to virtual BOS, and we are successfully conducting a series of these BOS starting from June and will continue until the year end. So the main reason is we want to continue our engagement with consultants and contractors because your support is very important for us to prepare projects and to implement projects, right? And of course, for the next year, we're still considering, depending on how the situation with COVID improves, if there will be an opportunity to organize a big event in person, we will do that. But in the meantime, we will be focusing our efforts on virtual BOS. And later this year, in October, actually October 29, we are going to organize one big virtual event to launch our new business opportunities website. We are currently working on improving its content so that there is more useful and relevant information, especially the information related to business opportunities in the projects which are trying to address the COVID impact. And basically just 2 days ago, we have shared a memo to the board of directors informing about our plan to conduct this kind of launch event. It will be maybe a 2-hour session with our vice president and director general of procurement department participating in it. So I hope you will receive that information from your constituencies, and we are looking forward to your active participation in that event because it's virtual. There is unlimited number of participants. Eventually, we will put some information on our website so that there will be a link to register. This is just in order to estimate and see how interested that event will be for our participants. And today's event, I understand, based on your request, is more focused on ADB's operation in the energy sector. And I am pleased to introduce our colleague, Stephane Peters, our senior energy specialist, who will share with you some information about ADB's activities in the energy sector, but it's so broad. I think he will be focusing more based on your request on a few topics such as waste to energy, ocean cleanup, and solid waste management. And after that, our senior procurement specialist, Stephane, Zadi, we will discuss about ADB's procurement framework because we have certain procurement policies and regulations which we will have to follow in recruiting consultants, in awarding contracts to civil work contractors or suppliers of goods and materials. And our policy has been changed in 2017. A new policy was approved by the board of directors. So we are basically now working for 3-4 years in the transition from old regulations to a new policy. And there are some new features that might be of interest to you. That will be presented by Stephane. And of course, we will also share with you how to find the business opportunities on ADB website. What kind of tips we would like to share with you in order to make your search more focused and more targeted, depending on which countries you want to work, in which sector you want to work, and what type of assignments you want to work. So we'll try to provide this information to you, and I hope you will find today's event useful. We'll be happy to answer any questions. And most importantly, I hope that today's event will help you to win contracts under ADB projects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rustam, for letting us know on the BOS goals. Our next speaker will be Stephane Peters, Senior Energy Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. He specializes in waste to energy topics in the energy sector group of Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department at ADB, responsible for developing the knowledge base, project development and implementation in waste to energy and supporting projects across waste. circular economy, and ocean impact. Please let us welcome Stephane.
Thanks very much, Jules, and thank you to our colleagues. Oh, gee, that's terrible. Let me change that off. Thank you to our colleagues in the Netherlands Enterprise Agency and our good friends at FAO for arranging this BOS. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a fairly broad set of topics, which are waste to energy, and then going all the way from waste to energy to the circular economy to the oceans. And that seems a bit broad. One of the things that we try and do is explain to people why it is that we are doing particular things. So this is becoming more of a focus for our activities. And I'll start, if I could go to the slides, I'll just start a little bit about historically what ADB previously did. So next slide, please. ADB historically, started with landfills and looking at landfill gas capture. That was quite recent for us. It was only about 10 years ago. We've done some work in rural biogas, again, about 6-7 years ago. We've done a lot of work in building community capacity in waste. And this is done under our sovereign operations. So to explain sovereign operations, about 2/3 of our lending goes to lending to governments. That is what we call sovereign operations. The next slide, the next area, which is developing the waste to energy market, is a different type. No, sorry, not next slide. Please go back. The next area that we work in is developing the waste to energy market, and that's working with waste to energy providers. So the people that make the large plants, and I'll talk about that in another slide, but that type of investment is done under our non-sovereign or private sector operations, and that makes up roughly a little bit less than 1/3 of our other lending. The division I work in, which has a very long name, is basically a university and think tank, and our job is to curate the knowledge of what's going on in the region, tie it all together, put it into some sort of cohesive story, and then identify companies that we can test new technologies with or test them in new markets to the benefit of our customers who are developing member governments. So things that we're testing are looking at novel solutions for island communities. We're doing some work on the Marshall Islands and the Maldives, which is interesting. We also run flagship events on energy, water and climate change. And then I particularly am involved in piloting new technologies. Next slide. So when we talk about the big investments, the private sector investments, we've had a couple in very large flagship investments in waste to energy in Vietnam and the People's Republic of China. We invested in a company called China Everbright, and they have undertaken a number of activities and we help fund those projects. Next slide. We similarly invested in another organization. Next slide, please. The Shanghai SUS Environment Group, and we looked at developing eco-industrial parks with them, which are basically in second and third tier Chinese cities. So we did this to catalyze the market, to provide a kickstart for PRC to actually get on top of their waste problems. And this again the government was keen on this. It was aligned with our country business strategy and our engagement with the government. So we identified a few companies to work with and pushed it forward. So next slide. So now we have to say, okay, we've done this with a few countries. We've done some historical work. Where are we going? And some of you are on the call, I know, are aware of this response. But we chose 12 pathways to explain what we're doing. And of course, the first one's going to be what we've done before, which is building large waste to energy plants in markets where they're necessary and they're legal to build. From those waste to energy plants, there will be fly ash generated. So the second pathway is looking at technologies and mitigation strategies to limit the impact of that fly ash on the market. The third one, which is pretty well aligned with what we did with SUS Shanghai, is looking at aggregating eco-industrial parks to promote recycling, to promote upcycling, to promote resource conservation, and generally start preparing people for a more circular economy. It's not a circular economy as such, because to do that, we need to do a lot of product design, which I'll talk about later on. Next slide, please. The fourth pathway talks about promoting innovative upcyclers, people doing things like decentralized gasification and small activities. We've got some Indian companies that we're looking at, and some projects that we're looking at in India related to that. We have, and that's with the private sector side. We have community level waste treatment. So there's a number of examples where small scale communities have done either biological, mechanical treatment of waste, which is done very well in Europe, or looking at hybrid models, which are not exactly the same, but developed out of Asia. The sixth pathway is probably the most important one, which is digitizing waste collection and treatment. We recently had an online challenge where we expected to get 20 participants. We got 104. We had 28 really good operating commercial firms pitching for a $10,000 prize to do a pilot. The winner was a company out of India, and we're organising that on the east coast of India, and that's going to be hopefully implemented in Q1 next year. This again is part of that the pilot activities that we're doing. So you'll see that there, just to reinforce the point, there's the sovereign lending, which is lending to governments on large scale projects. Then there's the lending to commercial operations, which is the private sector, to help build those markets. And then our group, the SDCC, do a lot of the piloting and, finding new technologies and helping promote those. Pathway 7 is then saying, okay, if we have digitized waste collection, let's try and link that up to people who are prepared to clean up the environment and use digitization to clean up the community areas. Next one. Next slide, please. Pathway 8 is actually looking at this on a much larger scale and transforming regional ports. And we have some activity going on that with our regional cooperation and integration department at the moment. Pathway 9 is digitizing extended producer responsibility. Taipei, China has a very well-functioning extended producer responsibility scheme, which they are partially digitizing. We think this will be a very large growth area, and I'm sure that in the Netherlands there are people who are doing this, and we would really like to know about it. Pathway 10 is strengthening recycling supply industry, so supply chain. So looking at supporting those people who are turning waste plastic into pellets, or supporting those companies that are developing that supply chain. That's something that we want to do more of. Pathway 11 is looking at engaging with communities to look at redesign, to engage with large companies, fast-moving consumer good companies, to redesign their products. And we're doing some work with people like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste and a number of other organisations. And then the final one, which I think people forget, is that we need to strengthen our government's capacity to enforce and govern these supply chains so that they can get on top of developing them. That capability development is an essential role of ADB, and it's actually an essential role of any project we do. So don't be surprised when you get asked a question, what are you doing to help build local capacity? Next slide, please. So this is just looking at a little bit about digitized EPR, or extended producer responsibility. We see that there will probably be ground level apps that will communicate to tie in the community and communicate amongst stakeholders like waste collectors, consumers, and then the cities. But at a national level, there'll need to be a much larger, stronger form of funds management to regulate the policy issues, the tax issues, the subsidy issues, to build that system. That is an ongoing piece of work, and there will be consulting opportunities for that will not necessarily be technical waste work. They will probably be IT work or governance or management consulting support activities. These are all things that are coming up. They're not coming up right now, but they are in process. So we're sharing our view of what we think is going to happen. Next one, please. Next slide, please. So, excuse me. We have a policy or a thing we think about, which is from source to sea. So looking at the impact of all of our operations, whether they be waste, whether they be transport, and looking at how we can influence those and how we can align them with our development objectives. So sometimes people talk about development objectives. Very simply, ADB's development objectives are to reduce poverty and to mitigate the impact of climate change, which disproportionately affects the poor, especially vulnerable people, including women and children. If you can answer that question in the activity you do with ADB, you'll be on a good path. So Here's some of the activities. I'll go into this a bit more on the next slides. So next slide, please. So we have a number of research projects we're doing at the moment, which is under our environment group, one of which is the Source to Sea activity, which is primarily focused on ocean plastics. So part of this will be developing a solid waste hub and technology hub in Indonesia. It'll be looking at engaging with projects in Vietnam. So there will be opportunities for consulting activities within that project, but there will also probably be some technology opportunities as well. And if you'll have a look at, it talks about TA, which is technical assistance. It's a cluster sub-project approved, proposed for 2021. There's $13 million. It'll go till 2023. The participating countries that are actually the work is going to be done in are mentioned. And then the key partners who are funding the work is also mentioned. Next slide, please. Moving from the plastic side and then looking at critical coastal infrastructure, you'll see that we're also doing some similar work. Now, they are related. The activities that this is actually being done under the same group. The amount for the TA is a little bit smaller, more participating countries, and it's looking at doing action plans and helping government develop the capacity to understand and manage this program. There will be consulting opportunities again on this. Next slide, please. And then greening ports, which I talked about before, which is looking at how can we make the ports in a number of our countries meet the MARPOL convention, but also, have a less environmental impact, provide more opportunities for integration of green services, whether that's, looking at marine fuels, a whole bunch of activities. That's the activities that we're doing with that. Now, you'll notice a few acronyms. Those of you who've worked with ADB will know that ADB loves acronyms. So SDCC is Sustainable Development Climate Change, RETA, Regional Technical Assistance, RETA. Then you go to the second line, RCI, Regional Cooperation and Integration, which is a department. Then, is a thematic group. And then you look at OPPP, which is the Office of Private-Public Partnerships. Then ETG is the Environment Thematic Group, and then the Transport Sector Group. So there are a number of acronyms, and Mark very well suggested that teaming up with people is a very good way to start your journey with ADB. It can be a very large organisation to come into, and there's a lot of acronyms. The objective, though, is to identify what you can do and what your skill set is, and is make that very clear through engagement through our CMS system for consulting activities, or through opportunities on the for works and goods and works contracts, or looking at engaging with SDCC on piloting or identifying technologies which you think can integrate. And the best way to talk about that, to engage with that, is actually to reach out. My email's at the back of this presentation. Please feel free to reach out. Next slide, please. So when we look at ocean finance, the Healthy Ocean Action Plan is actually pretty well championed by VP Ingrid Van Ees, who's a Delft graduate and is one of our vice presidents. And it talks about how we can look at financing a range of activities. So the Ocean Partnership Financing Facility is basically a fund that we're setting up to help develop these projects, both at a national level and also to look at potential piloting of activities. The private sector engagement in oceans and ocean-related activities is going to be under a separate pot of money. However, when we talk about ocean activities, waste management and wastewater within 50 to 100 kilometres of the ocean is classified as an ocean health-related activity, because quite a lot of the plastics, well, all of the plastics in the ocean have to come from somewhere, and about half of them come terrestrially. The other half are fishing nets and discarded marine debris. So opportunities for things like recycling of nets, looking at opportunities for people to grow mangroves, looking at new technologies, new knowledge. ADB is looking for knowledge to help us solve the problems of ocean health. And again, there are ways to engage, whether it's through a consulting assignment or whether it's just through coming and saying, this is our company or this is our organization, this is what we do, and we would like to share that with you. We have a mechanism for you to do that where you come and do a presentation. You can do it virtually if you want. You can reach out to Mark and say you'd like to do one, and then he would point you to the right people to talk to. So next slide, please. So on that note, my name is Steve Peters. My email is speters@adb.org, and my LinkedIn profile is Steve-Peters-Engineer at LinkedIn. Very happy to talk to any of you in relation to waste to energy projects or anything to do with ocean health, and if I can put you in the right direction, I will. And on that note, I'm going to hand back to Jules, and thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Steve, for keeping us informed on the new business opportunities and information on the waste to energy and solid waste management. Our final speaker for today is will update us on procurement policies. Let us welcome Senior Procurement Specialist Stephane Zadi. He strategically supports infrastructural projects and design procurement in East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Pacific, focusing on resilience, operations and maintenance, and low carbon technologies. He also leads on innovative water and wastewater practices and technologies from the water service industry. Before ADB, Stephane worked for 15 years with private water companies, primarily in the Suez environment. Please let us welcome Stephane Zadi.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm just stopping my video to save some bandwidth. So I have the pleasure now to jump with more detail in how to access the fascinating opportunities that Stephane just explained in the topics, for instance, of waste to energy and cleaning oceans. So we'll have about 30 minutes in front of us, and I will cover 4 main topics that I will explain now. So next slide, please. So first, I will remind what is ADB and what is the scope of its main operations. And interestingly for you, I think we will show you who are the top suppliers for ADB by countries. Secondly, as Rustam briefly introduced, we have a new procurement framework since a few years. So I will explain more in detail what is it and what does it change for you when you apply. And then we will jump into the bidding strategy, meaning what we can give you as advice in order for you to get successful bids. And finally, in this very specific context, and that is why we have today this seminar remotely, in this very specific COVID-19 context, we will also present to you what are the specific opportunities and how ADB has prepared specific support for its countries and how you can also participate to this initiative. Next slide, please. So you have here on the right our headquarters that we have not been since a few months inside because we are now working in work from home. But this is the headquarters that is located in the center of Manila. So ADB has been founded in 1966. There are today 68 members and 49 regional members, and Japan and US are founding members, and they are the largest so far. So we have about $32 billion of operation. It was the figure in 2018. and there are about 3,000, a little bit more than 3,000 staff from about 60 nationalities. Next slide, please. So how ADB is working? So there is a very unique mechanism that Adb is using. So TAPIC in its own resources of ordinary, concessional, and special funds in order to develop the project cycle and to be able to propose loans, grants, technical assistance, equity, and guarantees to its developing member countries. So ADB, as you know, it's a development bank, but it's not a traditional development bank in a way that it's a finance plus plus, as we say. So it means it's proposing financing, but also co-financing to leverage the dollar put in the project, policy advice, knowledge, and capacity development. So it's really what we call a knowledge bank. So we are proposing, as you saw before with Stephane, a very high level of expertise, of technical expertise to be able to develop the projects. So in 2019, we had about $33 billion of operation, and you can see it represents about 15 billion of procurement. And you have support in public sector, but not only, because the private sector is growing, and there is a target for the private sector to represent about 30% in 2030. Next slide, please. So what are we financing? So mainly you have two types of business opportunities, so goods and civil works, and consulting services. So we develop this through executing agencies in the developing member countries, and also some financing that we are directly implementing by ourselves. So it represents a very large number of contracts, as you may see, 4,000 for goods and civil work, and about 5,000 for consulting services. Next slide, please. So where do we work? So as we said before, we have, and it was shown in Mark's presentation, you have all the regional basis of ADB. And so we are quite spread in Asia, and we support our 46 DMAs, governments, and as I said, private sector also more and more. And we have a wide range of partners in NGO, foundations, academia, donor, and international organizations. So the 5 biggest borrowers last year were India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia. Next slide, please. So there are different types of opportunities, as I said before, but to go a little bit more in detail. So what we are procuring, it can be goods as machinery, equipment, computers. It can be roads, civil works as roads, wastewater treatment plant, for instance, pumping station, power plants, schools. Consulting service, we use it to start the project, for example, for the feasibility study, to make site supervision, project preparation, but also knowledge product. And also we use what we call non-consulting service for other surveys, training, capacity development, and event management. Next slide, please. So you can see here the top suppliers by member states. So you have the data is quite updated. So for 2020, please note that it may change because it's not the complete data, but it's a cut at end of July. So you may see India, PRC, and Indonesia in the first countries. Next slide, please. So now for works, you have the same figures, and if we take the updated one for 2020, you have again India, PRC, Philippines for the first countries. Next slide. For consulting services, so we will have a different type of countries, more Western countries generally providing consulting services. So you have for 2020, India, Australia, Korea, UK, and Indonesia. Next slide, please. So now it's a slide showing who are the top 5 suppliers of goods from 2017 to 2020. So it's cumulative. So you have for the first one, you have BEML, ABB Group, and TBEA. So you see that the contracts are quite very, very large. So it's a big amount. But we have also, as we will discuss after, a much smaller size of contract. Yeah, next slide, please. So for works, we have Siemens, Larsen & Toubro, and China Railway Construction in the first place. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Thank you. So now, interestingly for you, I think, so you have the main companies from the Netherlands who have been awarded with contract. So you see here that the numbers are quite important with a very large contract. So for Tahal Group, Strichting Group, Strichting HEE Delft at the first position. Next slide, please. And here again, for consultants, so amounting for a total of about $60 million, we find Royal Asconic, Deltares, Hill International, and Hecoris BV at the first position. So you may see that the Netherlands has also very important and large contracts in the last years. So these data are from 2015 up to 2019. Next slide, please. So now we have seen more detail related to Adb operation and suppliers. We will jump into the procurement framework. So until 2017, Adb had a procurement framework that was consisting of what we called procurement guidelines. So we may say that it was very prescriptive with a lot of very detailed instruction for consultants and for contractors, and also internal rules that were very prescriptive. There has been a reform in 2017 to focus more on what we call principles. And so that now the framework is based on policy and regulations. So we will see more in details what it will change, but it's mainly introducing 2 new key principles that are quality and value for money. Next slide, please. So you may see, probably you know it already, the key principles that were fairness, economy, efficiency, and transparency. So as you know, we are operating with a very high level of standard regarding to ethic, fairness, to make sure that our procurement process are transparent and equal for all bidders. But we have introduced also quality and value for money to ensure that for each project, each contract, there is a very thorough analysis of what is the best option, what is the best solution according to the country capacity, according to the supplier's context, in order to define what is the level of risk and to have the best procurement solution. So quality, introducing quality is very important because it means that we don't have only a cost consideration. And value for money, it means that we are focusing on the project itself, but also on what it delivers for the end users and what will be the long term of the project, for instance, related to operation and maintenance. That is a very important topic for us to ensure that the infrastructure is built for a long term, for example, or that the consulting service delivered are also delivering long-term effects. Next slide, please. So we have here the procurement cycle. And as you may see, this new framework is introducing procurement at a very early stage in the project. So you have on the top of the slide a country partnership strategy that is defining the main sectors of intervention. And at the project conceptualization stage, the procurement risk categorization will start in order to define what we call a strategic procurement planning. So it means we will really assess from the start the different options, and we will be able to define the best bidding document according really to the reality of the suppliers. I mean, who are the suppliers who can potentially work in the different country, and what is a practical assessment of the project. So you may see, and we will discuss that after, that you can also have opportunities at all the different stages of the procurement cycle, from identification, project definition, implementation, and also evaluation. Next slide, please. So how do we procure? So ADB is working very closely with executing agency in the different countries, who is directly responsible to procure most of the goods, work, and services. So we are supporting the executing agency, but of course they are developing the processes by themselves for most of the project. And we are giving technical assistance, grants, staff consulting support in order to ensure of the quality of this procurement process. So we may have different type of review, pre-review, post-review, depending on the level of the borrower. And also we are usually supporting open competitive bidding, and international bidding also is a preferred option to have really the most transparent process, but also to be able to introduce technology, to introduce innovation in the process. So we are really trying to have everywhere in all our countries the best technology available on the market in the context, so with a realistic assessment of the context, but trying to introduce this high level of technology in our project. Next slide, please. So the procurement system is composed of many different types of templates that is regularly updated. So you may see here, for example, the pre-qualification, the goods contract, the work contract for large and small contracts, the plants are for design, supply, and installation, but also for design, build, and operation. So it means we have different templates to introduce also operation and maintenance in the contracts. A request for quotation, consulting service, and non-consulting services. Next slide, please. So we have different procurement methods also. So as I said, open competitive bidding is the preferred one, but we may have, according to the context, different options. As limited competitive bidding, request for quotation, framework agreements, direct contracting, force account. I mean, we have very different options, and we are also developing our framework, for instance, with procurement of high-level technology, to be able to attract the best suppliers in our bidding process. Next slide, please. So this framework is very based on the highest anti-corruption policy and guidelines to ensure that at the whole stage of the process there is a very high fairness between the different participants. So also these ethical standards are being described in our documentation, and there is of course zero tolerance regarding corruption and any other collusive or coercive practice. Next slide, please. So what are the best recommended bidding strategy? Next slide, please. So here it's maybe, let's say, informal tips and suggestions to help you to really address with the highest chance of success our bidding process. So first, it's very important to network. So it's what you are doing today, for example, because you are connecting with us to try to get some information, to know us better. ADB, at the end of the day, it's people, so you have to know these people, and trying to really understand the country and project specifics. So I think in ADB, we are very sensitive to that, to make sure that the supplier, the consultant has a very good understanding of the context of the project in order to have an offer, a proposal that is really well adapted to the level of the project, to the level of the executing agency, to be able really to have a fine-tuned, a fit for purpose proposal. So as it was said before, we really give a strong level of attention to a technical proposal. So it's not only financial, it's not only the price that is important. Of course, it is important because it's a competition, but we are really giving a strong attention to the technical proposal. If there is any unclear points, please seek clarification. Be ready for possible bid extension or amendments because the project timelines may change. And really go on our websites to understand what are the different project development and what are the documentation available for that. But we will see that more in detail after. Next slide, please. So basically, what not to do, it's, let's say, classical mistakes. So failure to disclose conflict of interest, of course, it's very important. If you work with us as a partner, you have to be very transparent with us. It's important. Firms or JV partner not from ADB, a member country, cannot be accepted. Please respect the deadlines. Also, no conditional bids are accepted. And in terms of administration, be careful of being compliant. Sometimes it's really very small mistakes in, for example, missing bid security, letter of bid not signed, GV agreement not signed. That can be that can change the result of the game. So please take attention for that. When in doubt, always seek written clarification. So we really invite you to communicate with us. It's important to clarify any doubts. Next slide, please. So we have a debriefing and complaint mechanism in the way that it's always very important, either you have been unsuccessful to debrief and to understand why you have not been the selected supplier. Be patient. It's not because you have not been selected on a project that you cannot submit to another one. Sometimes it's a process, and you have to learn also to improve. And complaint can be filed directly to ADB, and you have online link that you can see on the screen. And of course, any frauds, anything that you find not compliant, you can please report it. Next slide, please. So we have a website that is very, I think, very well organized and filled. We are even using ADB staff using it ourselves very often, because you have really a lot of documentation inside. So as I said before, you can see all the project documentation, but you have also a space for you. So you can see on adb.org, work with us, and after you have what we call the business center, where you can find a lot of very interesting information. Next slide, please. And you have our CMS system that you should register to, and you have a regular, so you can see regular information and updates on the project, and it's really where you can find the different opportunities. Be ready to answer in a timely manner, because sometimes the offer can come with a short reply time. So really go regularly and seek information and register and really try to get update information on this site that is very useful for you. Next slide, please. So as I showed before, in the whole project cycle, you have a lot of documents that may inform you of what is the status of the project, what is the next step, and also regarding to procurement to get advance notices, invitation for pre-qualification, invitation for bids, consulting service recruitment notice. So identifying opportunities in advance is also making the difference for you, because you can be better prepared and have a better fit for proposal. Next slide, please. Now I will spend a few minutes on this COVID-19 opportunities. So to explain basically how it can be also new opportunities for you. So basically, ADB has been very mobilized during the last months in order to bring new support to our DMC countries. So with two main actions. First, facilitated processes. So it means that we have allowed some flexibility in the way we were supporting the project in order to ensure the continuity of the business. So to make sure that the projects are not stopped, that there are virtual missions or virtual meetings with the EA, with the contractors, so to really ensure a continuity of the recruitment and not to stop at all the process. We have also supported in order to propose adapted health and safety measures and to have also hands-on operational procurement of strategic support, for example, health equipment, but also food for some countries to really support as much as possible the economy of the countries, and also to develop training and awareness with new financing support. So you can access, there is a dedicated page for that, and you can see it on the screen. So you can access also to the different opportunities and bring your expertise to help us to better support the countries to cope with the pandemic. It's a moving document, so we are continually updating it. So please, again, go for regular checks, and don't hesitate to apply and to participate to this very important support for the countries. Also, as Rustam mentioned, we will have another event, and on which you are very welcome to attend, the 29th of October, where we will also tell you more on how ADB is reacting to help countries with COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. So for more information, you can reach social website. As you can see on the screen, you have ADB Consultant Network, ADB Suppliers Network. You have also ADB Business Center, on which, for example, this event today has been published. So you can also join these links and get updated information. And also, as it was said by Stephane, you can contact ADB staff, so please don't hesitate to contact us for any more questions on that. And with that, I stop my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Stephane, on your updates on the procurement policy and processes. Now we'll move on to the Q&A sessions. During the presentation, take a note of the questions that were sent in, and we'll be reading some of those questions and that the speakers address them. So let me see. First, I would reckon that question is for you, Steve. From the company is Union Corp, Jeroen. The question is, what are the dollar tickets per contract type on average? And what are sweet spot types of projects that the ADB likes to finance and support? One remark with this is if you could handle this question from a waste plastic recycling perspective.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Jerome, for your question. I appreciate it. ADB has changed a little bit the way that it funds private sector activities. So let's just look at the private sector side for the moment. We typically will look at projects in vicinity of $15 to $50 million in total capital cost for a private sector investment with our private sector infrastructure group, which is called PSIF. And there's 1 and 2. 1 is everything west of Myanmar. 2 is in Myanmar and everything east of it. So that includes the Pacific. That is for looking at things, for instance, like an eco-industrial park, or looking at a facility within an eco-industrial park, or a standalone facility for plastics recycling. We typically invest in the developing member countries. So when you saw Mark Rujaker's presentation, you saw a map of those countries that were not you'll see those that are not developed. They're not developed countries. They're the ones we invest in. We can do debt, and but we prominently do debt, and we do some equity. There's a group called Private Sector Ventures, PSOD Ventures. They are a new group. They are funding some private sector small ventures, 600,000, 2 million, 5 million. They're a new group. They're swamped at the moment, and I think very good idea to talk to them, and I'm happy to introduce them if you want to reach out to me later on. But I think don't hold your breath. They've got a lot going on. Now, going to the lending on the sovereign operations side, say, for instance, there is a project in Indonesia, and in Indonesia, there might be the Cities Development in Asia team, which is run by a Dutch guy called Jos van Vetten. Now, that might have opportunities to have a contract for a particular activity, or support for a particular contract through one of the implementing agencies in Indonesia, which might be a city or it might be a government agency. So there are 2 ways to get in. The procurement for private sector side, so the sovereign side, which is what I was talking about suggesting in Indonesia as an example, is pretty tough. It's very competitive, and it's not very fast. So another pathway to look at doing that sort of activity is to say, okay, well, look, we want to present this to ADB so ADB knows about it. So you drop Mark Rujaker an email and say, hi, we're very keen to present this to ADB. Mark will probably forward it to me. We'll have a look at the presentation. If we think it's world-class and best in breed, we'll get a presentation across to the environmental, climate change, urban and energy folks. And then they'll have a look at it and see if there's an opportunity to test bed it on a project. Now, I have to caution you with engagement with ADB, and this is based on experience over the last 2.5 years that I've been here. Be very slow with ADB, be very gentle, because 70% of the people that work there are introverted. That's the statistics. So just don't push too hard. If you want to introduce the technology, just recognize that sometimes it takes a while for people to respond. They're busy and sometimes they're a bit shy. Pushing too hard will probably be very counterproductive for you. So I'm very happy to look at what you have and see if there's an opportunity we can integrate you in and give you some advice on that. It's not strictly my job, but my job is to help develop the market, and I'm very happy to support people who do good things. So thank you for that. Done.
Yeah,
all right.
If I may add, Jules. Just to add to this very good answer, because I saw the question was also on what are the sectors. We didn't mention it maybe, but there is a very good document that is a strategy 2030 that is describing also ADB strategy in the different sectors. So as you know, you have so you are mostly interested by energy today, but there is also energy, transport, education, water, urban, health, and other sector as social. So you may refer to this strategy 2030. It's a very high-level document, but it's also it has been also prepared with experts as Stephane, and it's really including a lot of interesting information related to technology. And for example, waste to energy is mentioned, waste recovery is mentioned. So I mean, it's also interesting for you to read this document to better understand what you can also propose and introduce in the project. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So the next question we received is from Jan-Jaap Volmer. Steve, maybe you can answer this question. Is there, or Stephane, please, if you have any additions or feel free to respond. Is there a possibility to get information on recycling, upcycling projects for island communities, for instance, on pilots? And how do they get on these pathways?
Okay, terrific. So that's a very good question to ask, because I looked at a document last week which talked about an upcoming project on the island of Ebi in the Marshall Islands. That project is published on our website. So if you go to adb.org, you'll see some of the research projects that are on the website. So you can, it's all publicly available information about what we're looking at and developing. It is a bit of work, but I think it's worthwhile going through and doing the search. The project officer on that is on that website. That project probably won't come up for tender for another 6, maybe 12 months. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly. But that is one. Another one, which is further down the track, is across 600 kilometres away at Ebi, at Majuro in the Marshall Islands, which is a waste-to-energy, small waste-to-energy package plant, which is proposed, but that has not been approved yet. So the feasibility is done, but it's not approved. In the Maldives, there's a large waste-to-energy plant which is coming up for procurement, and again, there's a lot of work on, a lot of information on that on the ADB website. Where there's not a lot of information is things like opportunities to look at doing plastics recycling at a local level, or waste to fuels or solid recovered fuels. And those tend to be done hidden away inside urban projects for, or sometimes there's urban projects for sovereign operations. So the easiest way to find out about those projects is to just do a search on ADB's website. I would recommend you use Google to then search Asian Development Bank waste to plastics, recycling plastics. You'll get a lot of information, you'll get a lot of people's names. Then from those names, just reach out to them and say, hi, look, we're doing this, or we'd like to know more about it. But do the research first, so you can, when you talk to them, they don't have to educate you a little bit about what's going on. And you'll create a lot more confidence in them that you know what's going on with ADB. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And if any additional question comes up, I'll let you know. Thanks, Steve. Another question is from Steve. Pathway 12, if we talk about limitations of societal costs, how does ADB work on that?
I'm sorry, I missed you. You broke up there, Jules. What was that? The question is...
Sorry, I'll turn off my camera again. Maybe that helps.
Yeah.
So it's referring to, it starts with Pathway 12. They can talk about limitations of societal costs. How does ADB work on that?
Okay, so this is a great example of ADB procurement. Sietse Anagama has been in my office 3 times, and I'm quite friendly with Sietse and his team at AWECT, and I have the highest regard for them. So I've disclosed. You're totally right, Sietse, that it's not just about technology. There's societal implications as well. Underlying all of these activities on technology is how we can build in the capacity to the local governments and the local institutions that need to run these pieces of infrastructure. The project in the Marshall Islands is a great example. It may be $4 million or $3 million for a piece of equipment, but actually the training and the development and the support for the local government may be the same amount of money. And that's why sometimes when people think this particular project is very expensive, well, the reason is because there's a lot of moving parts to it. It's not just building a piece of technology and operating it, but it's actually getting people within the community to understand how it works, to consult with the community so that they don't get upset about something being built, which then they might think is dangerous to them, and also in building the capacity of the local institutions to communicate that and to work with the local communities to engage people to work on it and to build the supply chains into it. So when you look at development projects, sometimes there is a criticism that they're quite expensive. Well, one of the reasons is because you're not dealing with a fully developed economy. You're dealing with economies that, are still emerging economies. They're developing member countries, as we call them, DMCs. So you're totally correct. So helping people in these particular markets is very important. I won't go into specifics because sometimes that comes across as being negative. But if you want to talk about some place that's doing it right, the Netherlands is exactly the example. So thank you. I'm done. Jules?
I have another question for you, Steve. Last one. What are the current WT ongoing opportunities, Unity's country stage project developments? I hope that's clear.
Okay, yeah. So there are some things I can tell you about, like I talked about in the Marshall Islands and the Maldives. There are other projects where we're talking to commercial organisations in particular countries under NDAs, and I can't talk about them. In terms of engagement with organisations, it's public domain that the Alliance to End Plastic Waste is talking to us. We don't have a formal engagement with them yet, but we are talking to them about possibly supporting some of their cities' activities. So I would suggest, if you're interested in upcoming projects or you have something that you would like to propose, I would also suggest that you seek out the Alliance to End Plastic Waste and some of the other platforms that look at that. I would suggest that you engage with city development in Asia. Joris van Etten is the coordinator for that in Indonesia, and Lara Arjun is the coordinator for that in head office. Those were two really good places to start. There are a number of smaller activities inside country programs, like in Pakistan, we're doing projects in KP province and in Sindh province, looking at increasing the capacity of local waste collectors. But there's a very small component for recycling and upcycling because there's still, they're not ready to get into that part of the supply chain yet. They're close, but they're not ready. So, and in Indonesia, there are activities, and in Cambodia, there are activities. Vietnam, there are activities. But again, some of these are sometimes caught up in large loans of, say, $400 million. But in fact, there's only maybe $5 or $10 million worth of this activity in that loan, and that will come out through So to answer the question, you need to do a little bit of research on what projects are in hand on the ADB website, but you also need to do, as Stephane very clearly pointed out, engage with the PPFD, the procurement team, about what's coming up. And I think it's worthwhile also just talking to the officers involved. Again, I'm very happy to talk to anybody and point them in the right direction so they can start talking to people. Expect to do 6 to 10 months worth of engaging with ADB and talking to project officers before you really understand what's going on. Okay, that's my advice. Okay, so hopefully I've answered that question.
Thank you, Steve. We've run through the question we received so far. So if you have all participants, if you still have some remaining questions, you can still put them in the chat box. But maybe in the meantime, I have a general question we received from companies.
Jules, I see a question on a potential partner. I'm not sure we have answered it.
Oh, I think that's one for you, Stephane.
Yeah, I think, okay, I will. I think it's an important question. I will answer it, and maybe Rustam, if he is still here, yeah, I think so, he can also complement. So is there an option on the ADB website for companies to present themselves to other companies as potential partner for submitting proposal? So I think the answer is no, but Rustam will confirm it. And it's a very important point, as I said in the bidding suggestion. It's very important to get the right partner when you local partner, for instance, when you apply to bids, to find the good local partner which has a good reputation and which will help you to get awarded by bids. So as far as I know, it's not on the ADB website that you can look for it, but they are by networking, I think, by reaching out ADB officers, reaching out locally also on the market, trying to see from the EA or other, having these informal chats and networking, you probably might get some information on this. Rustam?
Yeah, maybe, Joel, if we still have time, I could add a few points to this. So, of course, we do not have a function for companies to basically advertise themselves to others. But still, there is another option. We have a list of shortlisted companies for different opportunities, for different assignments in different sectors. So these are the names of the companies, and you can see for which assignments they had been shortlisted, in which countries. So you can reach out to them and basically start a dialogue, because what I see now, not now, but the trend for the last few years in shortlisting is that even companies with big names and very big experience, they're trying to form joint ventures and associations to increase their chances to win. Especially for big assignments like construction supervision or detailed design, which is multi-year, say 5-6 years, you will see top quality international firms associating with themselves, so that every time the shortlist is different. So company A is a shortlisting with company B for one assignment because they believe they will have a stronger position in the market, but for another assignment, a similar assignment, but in another country, they may find another partner. So for you, this is one option, of course, to explore, but this is a process. Yeah, it's not to say that you will send your kind of proposal to several firms and they will respond immediately. So you have to do some market intelligence. But regarding any type of opportunities, as the question was about the waste to energy opportunities, it's very difficult for us in any given time to say, yes, it is there or it is not there. I think Mark in his opening remarks has mentioned about one useful source of information which very often is being ignored. This is country partnership strategies, and more importantly for you is the country operational business plans. The country partnership strategy will describe the national development agenda of that particular country. This is what the country wants to do, and it will also describe how much it wants to borrow from ADB. Because it's not only ADB, there are many other international organizations providing support to developing member countries. So you will see the boundaries where ADB is going to provide its support, which sectors. But then if you look at the business opportunities, operational business plan, country operational business plans, it will list technical assistance projects and loan and grant projects, investment projects. So this is where the fun starts. You may find useful information in the technical assistance projects, which will basically indicate whether the country is interested to pilot test some new technologies or not, whether there are certain TAs which are allocated for the feasibility study of bigger investment projects. And then it basically signals to you that, yeah, country will probably have certain opportunities. The next step is to monitor, because at some point for all these TA opportunities, there will be request for expression of interest, and there will be terms of reference. So from there, you will be able to find whether something what you're looking for will be included in the project that is being prepared. Not 100% sure, but this is something which I think all of us will be interested to do. Like, for example, we are all trying to promote the new technologies, but the model which ADB uses is we are providing support to borrowers because they borrow money for projects which they believe are better for their economy. So there is also some kind of distribution of labor between different donor organizations. And although we are all trying to introduce innovations, maybe in one sector, government prefers to work with ADB, in another sector, it prefers to work with some other multilateral development bank. For example, I think also is aware this battery energy storage systems. These are not they're not the most recent technologies, but they were very rarely used under ADB projects because borrowers wanted basically thermal power plants. Gas-fired was basically the latest technology with the combined cycle gas turbines. So we stopped financing coal-fired power plants, and we thought, the innovation which we are bringing is combined cycle gas turbines. They have different types, improving efficiency, but now we see demand from some countries to introduce these battery energy storage systems. But that would first appear maybe 3 years ago in the country partnership strategy when we were discussing with that particular country. So my point is, I think a lot of information is available. It's, I think, up to you to see how you want to assess that. Whether you want to check each and every country and see what are the opportunities, or you decided for yourself that you are more comfortable working in one region and not in the other, and you limit your search to fewer countries. But then within that, still, I personally believe these country operational business plans are a very useful source of information for you to decide your next steps. So thank you. Sorry for such a long, long response.
Good answer.
Great. Thank you, Rustam. And maybe to add on that, if any the companies in Netherlands have some questions about finding partners, you can always contact the Netherlands Enterprise Agency on advice or maybe how we can assist with that question in forming consortia. Maybe as a last question, more in general, to the speakers, could you maybe elaborate a bit on the direct and indirect impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on current projects, but especially on the development of pipeline projects for the next year?
Who would you like to go first, Jules?
Yeah.
Maybe Stephane, you can start, or Steve.
Stephane.
Okay, I can start, and I will be happy to be complimented by Rustam because he has a lot of information on that. As I said, so please follow it closely. We have this 29th of October events where you will have many information provided. There is, of course, there has been a lot of support allocated from ADB from the existing TA. For example, there has been about $40 million of TA that has been remobilized towards this COVID-19 support. There are also this 20 billion, probably you have heard about it, of additional support that is also including budgetary support for the countries. But there is, of course, a lot going on. What we will try to do in this 29th event is really to bring some consultants who have already provided support for this. So that's why I think it's very interesting for you to attend, because you will get really specialist contractors working on that. So of course, well, personally, I think anything that is related to remote solution, digital solution is also very helpful in the different sector. And I pass the floor to Rustam to complete. Thank you.
All right, I will add a few points on that. Of course, we cannot deny that there is no effect of COVID. We see that effect at different levels. And first of all, the biggest impact is on the inputs of consultants and contractors who were already working in the field, right? So most of them had to leave the countries where they were working, and then basically they will have to resume the work, but there's a lot of uncertainties. Now, after several months of that COVID situation, we see that in some countries there is some relaxation in procedures, and some of the countries allow foreign contractors and personnel to come, but still it's a bit a long process. So we are affected because, say, for example, even if there is a infrastructure project where contractors are local, but the construction supervision engineer is a foreign company, which had to leave the country, basically there will be no supervision, or there will be some kind of alternative arrangement for supervision. Anyway, it will have an impact on the quality of supervision services and the quality of implementation. So we are trying to see how to mitigate that, because we all understand that not everything can be done remotely, especially for big investment projects where the preparation of the feasibility studies requires a lot of site investigations. That would be affected. But for the time being, I would say that ADB has not slowed down processing of the projects in those pipelines, which I mentioned in the country partnership strategies and country operational business plans. We are not canceling those projects. We may push them back in terms of approval because preparation will require more time. And there's still a bit of uncertainties. But we see already some progress in several countries where big contracts have been awarded, but there is another challenge because those countries introduced certain health and safety measures to basically fight this COVID-related impact. So these were not foreseen when the contracts were put on tender. So now there are additional efforts to negotiate between the executing agencies and contractors what measures they will have to introduce and how much it will cost and who will be responsible for monitoring of that, because without that the civil works cannot be done because the governing law is the law of the country. So these are big impacts, and that would delay each and every contract maybe by 2, 3, 4 months, depending on the country. But we hope we will be moving forward. With the consultants, with the new assignments, we have already kind of reached out to our regional departments and the governments who will be engaging new consultants, consultants for new assignments, to revise the terms of reference in a way so that they could propose more of work to be done by remote means. And because still there is an uncertainty about the travel. So we are seeing few contracts which are being signed on that basis. And of course, it's not the best scenario, but this is what we can use now. But I hope in maybe 6 months or so, there will be some improvements on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rustam. And that formally concludes us to the virtual business opportunities seminar, looking at time. I see that Mark made a last remark about on Rustam, their response to check the website. So on COVID impact on ADB operations. So if you look at the text box, you see a link where you can find more. On behalf of the host organization and the ADB, I would like to thank everyone for participating today and making time to learn more about ADB operations. In case you have any remaining questions after this webinar, you can always send an email to the email address you see here on the screen, po@rvo.nl. After this, we will share the presentations from to the people that registered. So if you missed anything on the slides, you will receive this information later on. All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Jules.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.